Hey everybody, my name is Mark, and today I would like to talk to you about my Hoback knives OneSam. All right, so the Jake Hoback OneSam. This knife is kind of controversial for a couple of reasons. One is just because it's made by Jake Hoback. And apparently, a couple of years ago, he either made some kind of a statement saying that his knives were 100% made in the United States. I don't know. I didn't care to try and look up all the information and chase what he said, and if it was just something that was said kind of, keeping things vague, or if he out and out lied. I kind of don't believe that I hope that he didn't just out and out lie about it, because usually things like that will ruin a knife manufacturer or anybody that's in the public eye, especially nowadays. Online rumors and opinions and the truth and everything else just spreads like wildfire. And so, if I have a feeling that if he had just straight up lied about what was going on, he probably wouldn't be able to stay in business like he is now. And the other reason that this is kind of a controversial knife is just because of the way that it's made. So, this knife has an adjustable detent. And so you can see, I'm going to get my crooked little pointer here. You can see this screw right here. Okay, here's the lock bar insert screw, and it holds this whole lock bar insert in. And then there's a screw here that pushes the detent ball in and out, putting pressure or less pressure on the blade. So it has an adjustable detent, where usually most other knives you would have to actually go in, tear the knife down apart, which you still do with this knife, and I'm going to explain that here in a little bit. But usually what you would do is take the knife apart, get the lock side scale, and remove the lock bar insert, the pocket clip also, so this lock bar moves freely. And this is a relief for the lock bar insert. Every lock bar is going to have something like this. Some are inside, some are just like milled grooves, but it's important to take some of the material out of the thickness of the entire lock bar, so it will hold tension and it will kind of move back and forth in a way that you can do it easily. So that's the whole point of that. And a lot of people know this, but there are probably some people, or hopefully that some people that watch this video who don't know this. And so I like to explain everything from start to finish, kind of assuming that not everybody knows everything. But I realize that some people do already know this stuff. So anyway, it's kind of controversial because this knife is a flipper knife. And so the way it was made, you either have a front flipper, or on this knife, there was a rear flipper tab. And so when this first came out, people were really having a hard time trying to tune this knife using this adjustable detent and get it tuned where you could both use the front flipper and use the rear flipper tab. And I totally get that, right? There are people who are going to complain about everything, and if it's not just perfect, they're going to have an opinion about it. But I got to say, this rear flipper tab right here was a hot mess. Not only was it extremely short and pretty pointy, I don't have little girl hands or anything, but every time, like, you had to make a conscious decision about where you were going to place your finger, no matter how you had this tuned, and deploy that blade using that back flipper. It was really tough. I am actually more of a front flipper guy anyway, and so I kind of went to work on this knife, trying to, because I like the overall design and the ergonomics of this knife. I like the size. I think it's a really good size to carry. It's a light knife, but it's not too light. There's like lots of good things about this knife. It just needed a little bit of work. So if you've watched any of my other videos at all, you'll know that I will anodize, you know, small animals that are in the room. I anodize a lot. So when I first got this knife, it was kind of a satin finish, raw titanium. And that would have matched the entire blade. So basically the whole knife looked like that blade. So it's just kind of a very intricate chunk of gray titanium. And so what I did was I put a bronze finish on the scales, and then I put it's kind of a dark gold finish. That's kind of what I was shooting for on the pocket clip and the back spacer. And so once I get that done, I started tuning this knife, and it took a long time. There's a balance, even with this adjustable detent, you can kind of see where that screw, and it's a pretty long screw. There are a lot of threads on that screw. And so when you're adjusting this detent, hoping to tune the knife so you can deploy it with the front flipper and the now absent back flipper, you're going to be running that screw unless you do something to the lock bar, and also the pivot screw. You're going to have to adjust that too, because there's a balance in all of this. If you try and just use what I found on this knife, in this example, it may not be on every knife, you know, every OneSam, but on this knife at least, without trying to adjust this lock bar and solely relying on this detent ball screw to move it in and out and put tension on the blade, I couldn't quite get there. I couldn't get where I wanted. And so basically you have to take this apart and take this lock bar insert out so that you can tune this entire lock bar. If you don't, then this screw is going to end up having to be like way out of the frame. And so you're going to have exposed threads here, which is not great. You know, it kind of defeats the whole purpose. I mean, I know it's supposed to be adjustable, but nobody wants a screw sticking out of the frame. Plus, in the location that it is, close to the lock bar, and when you're doing a front flipper, that screw sticking out so far, you'll cut your finger on the side of those threads. And it's kind of uncomfortable. Plus, it just kind of looks unsightly. It is almost to that point now, as far as I'm concerned. This is about the maximum that I would ever want this screw sticking out of the frame. But like I mentioned, it's a long screw, and so there's plenty more room. You could run this screw way out, probably, I wouldn't say 1/8 of an inch, but at least, you know, a 1/16, and maybe a little more than that. So I don't know. It's kind of rough, but you have to tune all of those three things: the pivot screw tension, and the lock bar itself, and this detent ball adjustment screw, all together, until you finally get a result where the front flipper on this knife feels really good, right? And the action itself is kind of where I would want it. If you don't do all those things, then you could get, like, I could run this screw in and out, and I could still deploy it But then when you're trying to put the blade back in the frame, it's going to put a little too much tension on it, and the action's not going to be the way you want. It's just like you really have to fine tune this knife. And so even after having done all of that, which I was willing to do, I don't mind. I tinker with things all the time, and tuning knives is kind of my thing. So didn't mind doing that one bit. And when I got it down to a point where I was really happy with the action on this knife, for the front flipper, the rear flipper still did not behave the way I wanted it to. It was still difficult to deploy. I couldn't ever get the action tuned for both of these flipper deployment methods. I had to choose one or the other. And because the flipper tab was kind of small and, a little painful, I went ahead. I'm a front flipper guy anyway, and I went ahead and chose a front flipper on this knife because it's about the perfect size. So for me, at least, for a front flipper to really work, the knife has to be kind of within a size range as far as length goes. When you do a front flipper, you're going to rest your pinkies usually on the pocket clip, sometimes on the side of the frame, but you have to have something to grip the knife with these fingers while you have, at least the way I do it, while you have your finger up there on the flipper tab. And if you don't, it's really kind of precarious. You don't have a good purchase on the knife. You have to have something to use for leverage. And so if a knife gets too long, like this is a fairly short knife, it is about the same, I believe. No, actually I haven't checked. So I was looking at the Oz Machine Co. Roosevelt a little while ago, and I was comparing it because I'm going to do an upcoming video on that one. I was comparing the length to a Spyderco Para 3, but I actually haven't. I think this is about the same size. This looks like about a 3-inch cutting length on the blade to me, but I haven't actually measured this. So anyway, it's got to be about the same, the right length. And if it's not, then it forces you, because a pocket clip is always going to be kind of the same length. Even a long knife is not going to have like a super long pocket clip. So pocket clips are all kind of close to each other in length. And if you get a knife that's, much longer than that, if the knife itself comes way up here, then to actuate a front flipper, you are forced to bring your hand way up on the knife, away from all of the things that you would, usually use for leverage and to get purchase on, so you've got a good grip on the knife, while your fingers are kind of out of position just to open the knife with a flipper. So this one is kind of the perfect size. It's really fun to actuate once you get everything tuned, and you only have to do that once. Like, this is all going to stay where it is. You can Loctite the pivot screw if you like. You could Loctite this detent adjustment screw, but it's kind of like it's under tension, and it's almost like having a lock washer because it's constantly, being pushed. The little ceramic ball in there is riding on the blade most of the time, and so it puts tension on the threads inside the frame, and so it's kind of, stable. It's not going to kind of walk itself out, I don't believe. It's not like just a loose screw over here on the side of the frame, and it's, going through a little bit of shock every time you deploy the blade or carry it around, and it could possibly walk out. I don't see that happening with this screw. But like I said, even after all of that tuning and everything else, because of the size, I believe, the shape, and also maybe the location. Some flipper tabs work because of their position relative to the pivot. So if you had a front flipper and it was down kind of below the pivot here, it would be really hard to actuate. You'd have to get leverage, bring it all the way up, and get past that pivot so that it would kind of swing. This one you can see is well above the pivot. And so it looks a little odd when it sticks out that way, but that's kind of a good design feature because it's going to let you, with minimal effort, just rest something, either your thumb, which I can't do very well because I'm old and I have arthritis, but as far as like you can just barely rest whatever you're going to use to actually weight that front flipper and put a little tension on it, and it's just going to release, defeat the detent, and deploy. So it works really well. The back flipper on this knife, not so much. I don't know if it's a position because it was right here, so it's on a even plane with the pivot, or just the shape. So I had to get rid of that flipper in the back. I could have left it. I wasn't going to use it, but it wasn't in the way because it was pretty small. But you know, there are lots of knives where people do flipper deletes all the time, and so that's what I've done on this knife. So that flipper that would have been sticking out right here is gone now, and when you turn it over you can see where I've taken it out. It looks, and it's kind of weird because the design of this knife, you can see where the lock bar that he has comes way up above the engagement point. Let me see if I can get a good angle. So you can see how much room there is between the blade where it's ground for, it's got a flat to engage the lock bar, and then the top of his lock bar. So there's actually like a lot of room there, but that's not from me taking the flipper off there. I didn't like go into that area. That was always that way. And the way that you can kind of see it better is if we look on the other side. So when that's out of the way, you can kind of see where, here we go. So this is the face that's ground, like at the factory, and that is a flat face that's going to engage the lock bar. And then you can see my radius from deleting the flipper tab comes down, and it sits right there. So I didn't get into this area at all. I didn't make it smaller or anything like that. I didn't touch this area, and I believe it's kind of important not to, because those are mated surfaces, and the tolerance is pretty close. And you know, if you mess this area up, then basically what's going to happen is you're going to have, it's called lock rock. And so there's a couple of different things. There's, you know, blade play side to side that you'll hear people talk about. And basically if it's up and down, like this direction, if you have it locked and the blade is going like this a little bit, and it's just, sometimes it's just barely, you can barely feel it. But if you change the tolerances on that, that's why when you're tuning a knife and you're trying to get the action, or if you're trying to address a lock stick issue and you take out the lock bar insert and you polish or hone the face of the lock bar that engages the blade, it is so important because you cannot put any material back once it's gone. So if you remove too much material in that area, because the blade is held in place by a pivot, and that's not going to change, and the lock bar is held in place by, or the lock bar insert is held in place by the lock bar, and that's really not going to change. That's set. So you can't mess with those two things too much. And if you do, then you're going to have lock rock, and it's going to go back and forth a little bit, and it's not going to lock up solid. So this knife has all of those things addressed, and it is awesome. I like this knife quite a bit. I like the action on it now that it's tuned. I really like the blade shape. To me, it looks like kind of a Koenig Mini Goblin, or even a Herman Vespertilio. I like this knife a lot, and to me, it is an excellent everyday carry knife. So if you are thinking about getting one of these, which when I was thinking about buying one, I was researching it and looking at a bunch of different videos, and the things that I have changed on here and had to deal with are the most prevalent things that you're going to hear about in videos by knife reviewers. But I would not let that stop you, because this is an excellent knife once you get it tuned a little bit. You don't have to take this rear flipper off and delete the flipper like I did. You can leave that on there. But if you spend time tuning this knife and you get it the way that you want it, you are gonna love it, because this is a great knife. So I hope that helps some of y'all out there, and if you're thinking about buying one, you definitely should. So that's it on this one. Thanks very much for watching, and I appreciate it.